Hello and welcome to the CBB Supershow. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85, and we're of course brought to you by the world famous FTN Network, live on the YouTube channel, on Twitter, and everywhere else that you can find a show/podcast like this. I appreciate the continued support that you guys show the program. Simply dropping a like helps us so very much. So if you could take a second before we get started to slap that like button around, helps us tremendously. What a crazy, crazy night college basketball continues to be. We are truly in store for a wild March Madness. You thought last year was insane. You thought a couple of years ago when Virginia had lost to a 16 seed, the first 16 seed to win was wild, not to mention a second 16 seed. But we're in store for some truly crazy, wild shenanigans, pure chaos. I know Rothstein says it's not chaos, it's just college basketball. It's definitely chaos. It's definitely chaos. We're going to see some really wild stuff in the tournament. Down goes Purdue as the number one. Down goes undefeated Houston. Shout out to Iowa State. Welcomes Houston to the Big 12 with a just kind of a slap around. Like Houston got close, but they didn't score for the first 8 minutes or something like that. Simply wild. Nebraska under the mayor playing their best basketball so far. Looks to me like we're getting some Iowa State, DeAndre Kane, Georges Niang, Monte Morris vibes from this current Nebraska team with Fred Hoiberg. So you have to love it. You have to absolutely love it. There's nothing better than college basketball. I had to move the background a little bit because, after a performance like today by the man, the myth, the legend, not Ric Flair, not Sting, but Dylan Dessou of Texas. That's the jersey hanging up behind me there. Dylan Dessou finally gets the start that he deserved, right? Continued to say last night and for the last few weeks, why is Coach Terry not starting Dylan Dessou? He appears to be healthy. He's the best player on the team. He's the best player in the conference. Might even be the best player in all of college basketball. And I did notice many of you did, he got the start today. Caden Shedrick actually ended up being a sneak scratch, but not starting. I had to put the tweet out there. It's Dylan Dessou appliance seasons. You guys know that he got me the washer and dryer. The missus wants some more stuff. So Dylan Dessou, plenty more where that came from. 33 points against Cincinnati. This Texas team is still in dire straits. They needed a absolute monster performance from Dessou to actually beat Cincinnati 74-73. 23 shot attempts, 33 points, made 4 of 10 from long range, 6 rebounds, 1 assist, 4 steals. That's 4 swipes, 2 blocks, a masterpiece. Will never be under 5K again as long as he lives or until he gets to the NBA, I guess. So I hope you got him in there. He's about 27% in that large $15 GPP. I'm sure he was higher in single entry stuff. The fact of the matter is when Caden Shedrick becomes available again, you simply cannot bench Dylan Dessou and bring him off the bench. You have to put Brock Cunningham to the 6-man role. If you want to start Shedrick with Mitchell and Dessou, it's possible because Dessou can shoot threes and doesn't have to play the 5. It's a little bit of a wonky lineup that Texas is going to run with Shedrick there too. But, at this point, how does Dessou not continue to play 30-plus minutes? If that happens, if you got to tell Terry, if you're the AD, you got to walk into the facility and be like, look, if you don't keep starting this kid, you're out. I don't care about any contracts. I don't care about paying you. You're just out the door. So hopefully we get Dylan Dessou in March because you guys got to see tonight firsthand just how good he could be. Wow. I love Dylan Dessou, and how could you not, honestly? What a absolute stud that he is. What's up, Saul? Haven't talked to you on a show for a while. Good to see you. Who doesn't? Who doesn't like that? And all the innuendos. But Dessou and appliance season, we love it. We truly, truly love it. High scoring night tonight, as you can imagine. There was all that value and all the various options. Did warn against going 100% Xavier Johnson, so hopefully you guys did follow that advice because he pulled a Xavier Johnson. Saw people using the term lock, optimal, best play of the slate, all these other, statements about Xavier Johnson of people who maybe have not followed him for the past 19 years that he's been in college. Number one, he's just never healthy. Number two, consistency is just not a part of his vocabulary or his game. So I understand that his price was cheap. You had to use him in places, but there were other values available that did just fine. Ish Massoud was not one of them. Aziz Bandiago was not one of them, but Tyrese Radford was. Obviously, Dylan Dessou was. Hayden Hefner didn't do too bad. There was a myriad of different options that did do well. And overall, I think it was a pretty decent night. Night slate's going to end up being good as well because Omar Stanley is suddenly a god among men for Boise State. I don't know what what Mike's super secret juice he's been guiding into or, who he monstered, but suddenly Omar Stanley is like Shaquille O'Neal reincarnated. All right, we have ourselves a 9-game slate that we're going to talk about. If this is your first time checking out the Super Show, allow me to welcome you. What we do here is break down college basketball from a DFS perspective, prize picks, prop betting, all of that good stuff. We do the tried and true method, game by game breakdown analysis, talking about plays we like, plays we don't like, any sneaks, overpriced, underpriced, all of that good stuff. We will answer any questions, comments, concerns you have live, or circle back around and check out the on-demand version of the show where we will answer comments there as well. And I'm happy to report timestamps were placed on last night's show. A little bit later in the day, but I still got them up as I promised. And, I like to tell my kids I don't break promises. That's one I have broken to you guys several times. But going forward, there will be timestamps on each and every show. All right. The way DK is breaking down these slates, by the way, I'm not a huge fan of. I hope they don't continue to do this because it would be a kind of a, I don't know, watering down of the slates, creating a little bit of a lack of edge, making there a lot of overlap with the lineups. There's a 9-game main slate that starts at 3:30, 6:30, and then the 7-game night slate that starts at 6/9. Ordinarily, that would just be comboed into one 12 to 14 game slate, which we like, we love, we definitely want that. But this is the second day in a row that they've broken the slate into 2 and made them less games, although obviously it was 12 games /6 today. It'll be 9/7 tomorrow. Not a huge fan of that. I do see FanDuel starting to gear up their contest. I saw a lot of people asking about FanDuel. The projection sheet that we're working on seems to be doing quite well. Been running with it for about 2.5 weeks. Have started to add a little bit of FanDuel stuff there as well. Hopefully you guys found that beneficial. So we have the show. We have written content, player pools, exposures, basically, and then projection sheets, minutes projections, and fantasy points. Basically, the last thing left, the last piece of the puzzle will be getting our own optimizer, which we have for all pro sports. And we have some very bright, like just hugely intelligent people at FTN that can make that stuff and have. And that's definitely something that I am going to envision and try to make happen for both college football and college basketball so that we are a one-stop shop for all things collegiate sports. All right, let's get into this 9-game slate. Special request from the myriad of Carolina and NC State fans that we have, and ACC fans in general, or just college basketball fans. We're going to start off a little out of order tonight. Start with one of the later games on the slate, which is North Carolina and North Carolina State, the Tar Heels versus the Wolfpack. Hey, Alex, what's up, my man? Says good evening here. Let's put this on the board. Good evening to everyone except the University of North Carolina. I'm here for the trash talk. Let's see. I know Brett Belkey's in the house. Let's get this trash talk going. Yeah, they are cowards for sure. They're just, all I try to be, the splitting of the slates is clearly just a rake trap, right? I like to think that I complain the least. When contests are small, I don't really complain about that because I don't actually care all that much. I mean, I want them to be bigger, sure, but it doesn't like, a $500 to first GBP takedown. I'm not like, oh, damn it, I just hate $500. Yeah, get it away from me. Like, come on. But I will complain a little bit when they do stuff like this with the slate. So it is just a way to rake and create a lot of overlap. And you saw on tonight's slate, even in the $15, like Xavier Johnson was 63% owned in a 3,100 person tournament. Whew, that is outrageous. Dessou was 27% for comparison. Mark Sears, who was one of our favorite plays, was 17%. He's crushing it. And Michi Johnson was like 22%, who had a great first 8 minutes and then apparently was like on a milk carton the rest of the way. But let's get into it here. North Carolina versus NC State. I do have the Tar Heels here on the DraftKings board here, and this is one that I kind of did a double take on because I don't know that I like it, and I know Alex doesn't like it either, but 4-point favorites are the Heels per DK, 154.5 total. That is the second highest total on the slate behind the Miami versus Louisville game. Every other total on this slate is below 150, and a couple are 138 in that range. So not the best looking slate when you first look at the actual games. And I do think that there are a few we want to definitely kind of hone in on because they'll be more fantasy friendly and up tempo than the rest. When it comes to the way that these teams play, North Carolina right now, 61st in tempo ranking, 16th defensively on KenPom, 10th in offense. 11-3, they have rattled off 4 straight wins against the likes of Oklahoma, Pittsburgh, Clemson, and Charleston Southern after losses back-to-back on the neutral court to Connecticut and Kentucky. Still kind of surprised they lost that Kentucky game. I honestly don't think that Kentucky's as good as everyone else does, but I guess we'll find out here once we get into March. On the NC State side, not going to lie, they've been disappointing me a little bit. Even though they've been winning, for fantasy purposes, they've been kind of breaking my heart a little bit. 151st in tempo ranking, 70th in defense, 69th in offense. This team, however, does not turn the ball over. They take care of the business there, but we need to see some more consistency when it comes to this Wolfpack team. Looking at what they normally roll out in a starting rotation, they just beat Virginia by 16, by the way, but we didn't get the game we wanted out of DJ Burns, just 22 minutes there. Burns, Dennis Parker, who we love, future stud, DJ Horn, Jaden Taylor, and the immortal Casey Morsell. In a revenge spot, scores 5 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal in 33 minutes of action. That is a marquee Casey Morsell trademarked stat line there by him. Off the bench, Michael O'Connell played almost 30 minutes. That was interesting. Ben Middlebrooks and MJ Rice, and then the Mo Diarra token 3 minutes a game that he's been getting. Price-wise, Burns, man, 6'4". He's just really such a strong GBP play because he does have a high fantasy point per minute number. Unfortunately, he is just below 25 minutes consistently. I don't think he has the conditioning to do more than that. Even look at the game before Virginia against Notre Dame, 15 shot attempts. You'd think that's a 30, 40 fantasy point game, but really not the case. Only 22. His rebounding has suffered, and really I'm finding it hard to actually get there with him and beyond any besides a alt GBP build. Does have the highest usage rate on the team at 25% and the second highest shot rate at 25.3%. DJ Horn owning the number 1 shot rate at 25.4%. So I always love Burns, like whenever, and this is a classic, like Alex knows, this is a spot where I'm on record writing DJ Burns off, and I know better than to do this. And I'm probably going to have 0 exposure, and he's going to put up one of his 35-40s. And I know that Alex knows what to do here. He'll have heavy exposure because of it. But this is the time whenever I write him off. But just going up against the North Carolina front court and Armando Bacot, who just gets the benefit of the doubt by the refs, no matter what house he's in, draws a high number of fouls. It just seems like a very bad spot for Burns. I hope that he does well, of course. Jaden Taylor's price at 5.8. I've got a feeling he may project pretty decently here in the tempo boost. I haven't got any of that stuff set up. I will do so in the morning. Still love Jaden Taylor. He has not hit more than 18 fantasy points in any of the last 5. His ownership should be nice and low because of it, but a sub 6K price point. He's taking a ton of shots. Shot rate is now up over 22%, shooting 36% from long range. Just need to see some more maturation for him. There's some further development that's going to come along, but if anybody's going to get the most out of Jaden Taylor, it is a coach like Kevin Keatts, who has a history of developing solid, well-rounded guard/wing players. So I have faith, definitely have faith. At this point, DJ Horn is the best overall play on the team, but he's also the most expensive at 7K. I've been really hesitant to roster him, but he's pretty much the only one that you can realistically count on for a main build. Taking double-digit shots in each of the last 5, rebounding at a high rate. His assist rate has begun to spike, especially in the conference play, and he has just been a lockdown defender. And again, this is a team that really doesn't turn the ball over too much, so get a lot of protection there with DJ Horn. Parker at 5.3 as a starter. He's got upside. Definitely somebody who can pay off this price point. They'll need him against North Carolina for sure. His versatility, his ability to rack up rebounds. He can score. He can knock down threes. There are a lack of consistency with his actual playing time. He's just a really young dude that's really raw. So I do think he's a bit of a sneakier option here going up against this North Carolina team. O'Connell at 4.3. If we think he's going to be getting these kind of minutes and the last 3, 22, 26, 27, at 4.3, he's somewhat interesting. Not as good as the 3.5, 3.6 price that he has been, but he's definitely somebody that has kind of grabbed my attention somewhat. However, I don't want to get into the business of playing multiple Wolfpack guys in a single lineup. I'm going to keep my exposure to probably one per. And I feel like I'm going to be pretty heavy on Taylor against the grain where the rest of the industry won't. So I might not have as much O'Connell, but he's definitely in play as a value guy there. Not really using MJ Rice right now. And then we do have Cam Woods. Didn't play against Virginia. He's only 4K. We'll see what happens there. We'll have to get the scoop from Alex. A ton of talent. Somebody that we want to see more of. Maybe we will. We'll have to wait and see. On the North Carolina side, Armando Bacot remains way too cheap. Had a massive game against Clemson in which PJ Hall just apparently broken. Didn't do a whole lot. Now, Ian Schiffelin did do a whole lot, and he's starting to play that Hunter Tyson role for Clemson. But Armando Bacot was just completely unchallenged on the glass. 16 rebounds against Clemson, getting any shot he wanted. He did have some fouls late, but played 34 minutes, has hit 39-plus fantasy points in back-to-back games, and is only priced at 8.4 when we're accustomed to seeing him at 9K plus. Gotta like Bacot. When you look at the various pay-ups here, you, of course, have Hunter Dickinson and Kevin McCullough against a very fantasy-friendly defensive UCF. You have Devin Carter, who's going to be doing just ungodly things without Bryce Hopkins going forward. Norchad Omier, who is dealing with an ankle issue, which I don't think they're going to have to press him too much against Louisville. And then, of course, you got my man PJ Hall, Josh Odoro, and RJ Davis. So there's some very good pay-ups, much better than what we saw today, guys that we can get to. And that should at least make some of the rostership a little more spread out than it was today. At least we hope. The rest of North Carolina, RJ Davis at 8.5. Let's look at some history here. This might be a good thing to do. Let's see. All right. So obviously a different team last year, but RJ Davis completely shut down in the road game against NC State last year. Did have a monster 26 points against them in their home game. And then you go back 2 years back, 17 at home. And it looks like they didn't play them on the road there. So mixed results there with RJ Davis. I would prefer Armando Bacot. Always love Davis, takes a lot of shots, is on the floor for 35 plus minutes, but it just seems like he's more destined for a mid-20s to 30 fantasy point total than he is the 40, 45. And he's really rarely rostered so highly that when he does hit a 40, 45, you're not dead to rights. you're talking about a sub 5% RJ Davis typically. So I'm probably not paying up for him and instead going to Baycott on the same team. We do have some value options here. Cormac Ryan sitting there at 5.4. I would imagine he sees a bit of ownership here. He did against Pittsburgh when he was 5.2. Can't recall off the top of my head what his rostership number was against Clemson, but the last few times that he's been on a weekday slate and under 6K, I have looked over it because I checked the lineups and see what we're dealing with here. He's been looking at 20 to 25% ownership pretty consistently. Being that this is only a 9-game slate, it wouldn't shock me to see him eclipse even 30% in some of the single entry stuff. Harrison Ingram had a rough first half against Clemson, came around a bit in the second, but for him, it was a pretty tough game, only 20 fantasy points. He's sitting there at 7.3. This is a really nice buy low spot for Harrison Ingram, a player that the last half of December was above 8K, made it hard to play him. Normally, we can count on a 30, 35 from him. I'm a big proponent of using Harrison Ingram here before anyone that's not named Armando Bacot on this North Carolina team. Get to the right page here. Don't want to look at Caleb Love. All right. 21% shot rate, 20% usage rate, making 43% of his triples, which is one of the highest marks on the team. Cormac Ryan, who continues to chuck, is only shooting 29%, if you can believe that. He does have a 7.5% offensive rebounding rate and a 3% steal rate. Ingram has a swagger about him, which I love, but he's also a very sound player that is able to rack up those peripheral stats and isn't reliant upon his scoring, which they do have Cormac Ryan, RJ Davis, Armando Bacot to handle that. You got a guy playing 30-plus minutes guarantee, doesn't typically get into foul trouble, and certainly his athleticism could give the Wolfpack some issues. So I do like Ingram as a nice buy low candidate in this spot. And then lastly, you have Elliot Kadu, who has suffered foul trouble in back-to-back games. That has opened the door for Seth Trimble to play more. Both of them are about 4.4, 4.5. Trimble had a really nice outing against Pittsburgh. Played 23 minutes, 10.6 rebounds, had 21 fantasy points. He ended up with 21 minutes off the bench against Clemson, but much less success, only 8.5, but he has played 20-plus minutes in 4 straight as a 4.4. Do need some Kadu foul trouble there to pick him up, but it is kind of a low-end value there if you need it. If Wald is writing him off, strangest phenomenon. Yeah, man. I don't know. I would have to go back and really dig in, but there's been at least three times where I've been like, DJ Burns is too expensive. I love him as a player, but you can't use him. And then the next day he drops a 40. So I feel like his price is really nice and advantageous, but Jesus, I don't know how Bacot doesn't just put him to the bench real fast. 2020 game. 12-12, both games last year for Bacot. We let him eat and try to stifle the guards. That is a pretty good plan. I feel like Bacot and Ingram are going to have really big games here, and RJ Davis is one that I'd for in this particular matchup. So those are the two super fans of Carolina talking in the chat there. Definitely take what they say to heart because they know a lot about those teams. Although I found out Belky's he's a Minnesota guy a little bit, so he knows a lot about the Gophers too. In case anybody wanted to talk about Minnesota for whatever reason. All right, so Providence versus St. John's. This is a strange one. Obviously, Bryce Hopkins out for the year. St. John's comes in at 7.5-point favorites. It's a total of 145. There are two bets I like here. The over 145. I feel like both of these teams are going to be scoring a ton. And then I kind of like the Providence bet, the plus 7.5, which I know probably makes very little sense because St. John's is playing so very well right now. And the Friars are not, especially without their star, Bryce Hopkins. They have now lost back-to-back games, a home loss to a suddenly hot as balls Seton Hall team, which Kutri and I were joking in the Discord today that Seton Hall's peaking too early. I said, everybody knows you want to get hot in late February, not in early January. So Shaheen Holloway, rookie mistake here, getting hot in early January. What are you doing? And then a 9-point loss on the road to Creighton. They're still competitive. That's what I'm kind of getting at here. So if that spread gets any bigger tomorrow, I'm especially jumping on the Providence side, but I do like taking them 7.5. I like to mess around. We got a DK book practically in my backyard now. I go up there, a couple days a week that the family knows about. And I have been messing around with alt spreads, and this looks like a game where I might try to get a little fancy here and maybe find an alt spread of 10, 11, 12 points, something like that, which I know the odds on those are like minus 250, not great, but you string 2, 3, 4, 5 of those together, you can actually hit some pretty decent plus EV, for at least for me, parlay. So that's something I'll look at for this game. Ken Palm does have it 74.70. I know he's not the end all be all, but we know for a fact that sports books do look at his projections for scores and mirror a lot of their stuff, especially early season off of Ken Palm. He is the GOAT. So I like Providence here for what it is worth. The Providence team, the rotation starting 5 without Bryce Hopkins, and what we saw against Creighton was the following: the normal Jaden Pierre, Devin Carter, Ticket Gaines, or Devontae Gaines, depending on which box score you're looking at, and Josh Odoro. And then Corey Floyd got the start, not Garwi Duell. That was something that we were unsure about. We thought maybe Duell would get the start, maybe Floyd. Floyd did start and played 29 minutes. And that might look to be like, oh, wow, Floyd's the locked and load starter. It's important to note that Garwi Duell, he only played 11, yes, off the bench. However, he did get hurt relatively early. He ended up being fine for the most part, but he missed a big chunk of time initially with that injury, did come in, but, never got back in the flow of the game. So it is a weird thing to say, but I think Garwi Duell is probably a better option than Floyd, even though he's $300 more. And a lot of that has to do with game theory stuff, strategy. Because look, Corey Floyd at 3.9 as a starter playing 30 minutes is going to seem appealing. But in case you forgot, I'll remind you, you just played Xavier Johnson today, who's a better player than Corey Floyd, but had a real rough outing. And Corey Floyd is liable to put up single-digit fantasy points. He just did that against Creighton, a whole 5.5 in 29 minutes of action. His last 5 games, he has scored over 19 twice, 7, 6, and 2 steals against Seton Hall in 19 minutes. That was a big one. That was when Hopkins first had that, season-ending injury. And then against a Ivy League school, he had 10, 4, and 2 for 21 fantasy points. So it's not as if he can't perform here at 3.9, but I don't want to hear anybody talking about this guy's a lock or, 100% exposure to Corey Floyd. Like, just don't do that, because he's going to have a much harder time against that St. John's perimeter. At least I think so. So I think Duell matches up better against St. John's. We just, we're not sure if he's going to get to 20 minutes. If he's not starting, you're really looking at an 8 to 22 minute type of outcome. You're probably not wanting to use either. However, if you want to get some of those studs in and cover your bases, then it would make sense more in your single entry stuff to play just the starter, which would be Corey Floyd. You also have down there at 3.9 Rafael Castro, who I thought minutes would start to creep up here without Hopkins. They haven't. Conditioning is a problem for Castro. Can't use him right now. And the starter, Jaden Pierre, who had been under 5K for a month and a half, had a blow-up game against Creighton. His price is now 5.7. I do not like Pierre at all at that price. Would not roster him, even though we know he's going to play 35-plus minutes. He is just not going to be on my radar. And that's going to be one of those things important to note with the sheet, because today it had Nick Honor projected pretty well. And I told you guys, I'm not using Nick Honor. I don't blindly just use what the projections are going to say. I like to mix in my own plays like we did on Saturday with Mark Mitchell. Today on the night slate, it didn't really like Omar Stanley. It hadn't accounted for the fact that he's a super base god now and has scored 35 plus in 4 straight. So Stanley comes in at 9% on the night slate, and I just used him. So this would be a play that I could see maybe, projecting well, but no thanks. So just be aware of that. Devin Carter at 9.1, it's a high price, but really, I don't think he's going to be under 40 very much the rest of the season. And that might be a really hot take. But look at this. The fact of the matter is he's going to be playing all but probably 2 minutes a game going forward. If he can handle it, and I think he can, he's going to be taking no less than 18 to 20 shots a game the rest of the way. He's a very good rebounder for his size. He is involved with the facilitating of the offense as well. Lockdown defender at times. He gets plenty of stocks. He just has massive upside. And until his price balloons to where it should be at this point, 10K or more, and it should be, I think at 9.1, he's nearly a lock, as much as one over 9K player can be. And there are other payups on this slate that I do like, as I mentioned, but Devin Carter is just going to have such a tremendous amount of volume, Ray Battle like volume the rest of the way for this Kim English offense. 26% shot rate, 26% usage rate. He's got his 3-point percentage up to 40 at 92 attempts, so he's improved there over the season. 3.5% block rate, a defensive rebounding rate of 22.5%, a combined rate of 27%, and an assist rate of 20.5%. Carter does a little bit of everything. He's only 6'3" out there in the land of giants that the Big East has, and he's pulling down 8 to 10 rebounds a night in conference play. Have to love a dude like that. Josh Oduro, 25.5% shot rate, 23.9% usage rate, 27% combined rebounding rate. Oduro's been a strong play for us throughout the season, but 8-8 is going to be tough, and that's just going to be because he's also going to be playing 30-plus minutes, taking 15-plus shots. His rebounding numbers have been down the last few games, which is not ideal. We really need him to be able to contribute there. Of course, had that huge game against Butler a few weeks back, but 8A is a very tough price. You're only looking at 300 more to Carter. There's more downside with Oduro because, one, he's going to be more susceptible to foul trouble going up against Joel Soriano at times, and two, he doesn't have the same. I feel like I've been talking about conditioning a lot lately. I don't want to keep harping on that, but he doesn't have the same level of stamina, we'll say it like that, as somebody like Devin Carter. So Carter just kind of beats him there at that price. If Oduro was 7.5 again, then I would certainly be looking to him more. You have ticket games at 5.9, playing 30-plus minutes as well. It's pretty a safe option at sub 6K just because there's going to be the volume there, so you can certainly use him as well. And it's really just those three options for me in order of Carter, Gaines, Oduro, and then Floyd if you really have to do that. I'm not using Pierre, and at this rate, unless Duel starts, I'm probably not using him either. Gotta tell you, I'm not been that impressed with Garwi Duel. For somebody who's been getting, at the start of the season, potential lotto talk, first round talk, and he's just been fading. Like, he clearly needs to come back next year. I really would hope he does, because I think he could really ascend. But right now, I just haven't been impressed with him whatsoever. On the St. John's side, we've already got the news that Chris Ledlum is like 99% not playing, has not been able to practice really at all, dealing with his injury. So we will likely not see Chris Ledlum. It would be an absolute shock if that changed. So we can go into it assuming and planning for him to be out. Without Ledlum in the Villanova game, Dennis Jenkins, Joel Soriano, Brady Dunlap, who has been crushing the last couple games, Jordan Dingle, and Glenn Taylor, which is interesting because the game before that against Butler, they went with Dennis Jenkins, Joel Soriano, Jordan Dingle, RJ Lewis, and Chris Ledlum when he played. Dunlap played 28 minutes off the bench, and that was kind of his coming out party. He was knocking down threes, blocking shots, like, I don't know where he came from with that. Then you go back to the Hofstra game before when Ledlum was out. He was kind of on in every other game. It was Jenkins, Soriano, Dingle, RJ Lewis, and Glenn Taylor. Glenn Taylor caught a DMPCD a couple of games ago, although it looked like he might have played 1 minute, but I don't know. It's not that important. So there's been some changes in 3 straight games with the starting 5. One thing's for sure, we know Jenkins and Soriano are going to be there. We know Dingle at this point. They seem, Coach P seems like he wants to keep Dingle in the starting 5, even though I think he would probably be better as a bench piece. And then at this point, the freshman Brady Dunlap, with as good as he's playing, is probably going to remain in the starting 5. 31 minutes against Villanova. We could see Glenn Taylor. We could see RJ Lewis. Taylor and Lewis split that last spot, with Taylor playing 20 minutes, Lewis playing 19 and a half. To me, RJ Lewis is the better overall player, and certainly when it comes to fantasy purposes, he is the better of the two as well. His fantasy point per minute number is God tier, and he has a very high usage rate in some of these games the last few. 10 shots, 15, 8, 12. Like, he's just been taking shot after shot, and he's really good in this system. The whole meme where it's like, oh, I wasn't familiar with your work. I knew who RJ Lewis was, but he never, I didn't expect this from him this soon. So It's kind of like, I was familiar with your work, but I didn't know you had this in your bag. 3 straight games scoring double digits and scoring over 23 fantasy points, sitting there at 6-1. Would only really want to use him if he started, though, because it's going to be hard to peg his minutes. He has been super efficient, but 19 minutes at 6-1 is a little bit of a tough one to swallow. Dunlap is there at 4K. If he starts, absolutely. 18 plus fantasy points in back-to-back games, 28 and 31 minutes, has taken a grand total of 15 shots in those past 2 games after taking less than that in damn near every other game he has been in combined. 15 points, 2 rebounds, a block, and a steal against Villanova. 13 points, 2 rebounds, a block, and a steal against Butler. He had a block against Jalen Thomas from Butler, their center, and it was vicious. And it was almost like one of those career-ending moments, like MJ shaking Brian Russell. I just couldn't believe, because no offense to Brady Dunlap, but he's a kid that got made fun of heading into the season because he's on TikTok doing the dances and he's wearing the tight pants and cool. And you got Jalen Thomas, who's just like this massive human being, and Brady Dunlap's just taking his lunch from him. So Brady might be the real deal. And he's going to continue to play. I would really be shocked if he didn't continue to play 20-plus minutes. Now, our resident St. John's expert, A. Stills, didn't see that coming with Dunlap, but he did get the start. I would suspect we'll pick his brain in the Discord in the morning, but I would suspect that he'll come around there and probably think as well that if Brady starts, you got to project him for at least 20, 22 minutes at a low point. Because at this rate, what are you getting from Glenn Taylor? What are you actually getting from Glenn Taylor? Not a lot. He's not providing a lot. I know defensively you are, but he's so limited on offense that it's becoming a situation where the defense doesn't have to account for him very much. Jordan Dingle at 5'2". If he was the Penn version of himself, that would be a lock and load. Just not there yet. It's taken him an entire season to get there. I don't know if there's hidden injuries, what's going on, bad fit, but I don't think he's really that great of a play even at 5'2", which is a shame. That brings us up to Dennis Jenkins, who's solid as always at 7'6", and Joel Soriano, who is clearly going to be considered underpriced at 8'2" by everyone with a brain. He has been over 10K in the last month, over 9K. Now you're talking about an 8.2 price. No Bryce Hopkins. Still dealing with Odoro, but if Odoro gets into foul trouble against Soriano, they're going to have to throw guys like Castro out there, and Soriano's footwork is just way too good for Castro. He's going to just absolutely detonate. There's talk of the 2020 game for Baycott there in the chat. There's a legitimate chance for Soriano to hit 20 and 20 here. 20 real points. Like, we'll see what his prop is on the various, PrizePicks and DK and all that. But if his point prop is anywhere below 14.5, I'm just going to be like, it's not to be trendy, but I say this sarcastically to copy people on Twitter because it's funny that people say this stuff, but it's a generational wealth opportunity if Joel Soriano has a low point prop, which he probably won't, but just throwing that out there, he's going to absolutely just smash this Providence team. And I suspect he'll be one of the highest projected players in terms of value return on my sheet. Dennis Jenkins at 7'6", plays a lot of minutes, takes a lot of shots, facilitates, shoots, rebounds, just does everything. 3 straight games over 36 fantasy points. He's also not priced appropriately, should be over 8K. It's not like we're getting a super discount at 7'6". It's still, he's able to do some real damage to your lineup if he bricks, but I don't think he's going to brick here in this spot. All right, moving on to the next one. We have Northwestern and Penn State. The spread here is 1 in favor of Northwestern, total of 142. Now, Penn State is on the slate. What do we like when Penn State is on the slate? Usually, this is a DVP. This is one of the top 5 DVP spots of the season so far. Usually, we'll want to take front court players against them. They have Quetus Wahab, who's nearly 7 feet, but after him, they are severely undersized, and they have this Demetrius Lilly kid who's 6'10", but can't stay on the floor for more than like 30 seconds. They have to run Puff Johnson at the 4 sometimes even small ball 5. Zach Hicks, who is not a rebounding low post force. Like there's a reason Penn State just keeps getting demolished by opposing bigs. The matchup with Michigan State, Malik Hall, who had just a ridiculous game. We loved it. It was awesome. And then you had the game on Sunday against Michigan, which was on the smaller slate there. They got outplayed. They got outcoached. Mkwa he missed his, I think he got hooked, right? It was 25.5 on his PRA. He hit his fantasy total for us, but 25 is what he ended with. And then for some inexplicable reason, Terrace Reed played 16 minutes in like the best matchup ever. So Michigan wasn't able to take advantage, but Michigan is just not very good. So we don't have to worry about that too much. Northwestern, who do they have as a front court option, you might ask? And speaking of Michigan State, right after that great game against Penn State, they bricked against Northwestern and got totally outplayed. Malik Hall went from putting up a 50 to putting up -1. That's gnarly. But Northwestern in their front court, they have Matthew Nicholson, who is a very slow-footed 7-footer, doesn't play a ton of minutes. I don't think we can really utilize him, although it wouldn't surprise me if in the 10 minutes he put up an okay score, 4 or 5 rebounds. Nick Martinelli had been out there playing some of the 4/5 for them. We've had some success with him. He played pretty well in 22 minutes off the bench against Michigan State, 9 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists. But they did start the 6'10 kid, Luke Hunger, who is a sophomore, out of Canada, Montreal, Quebec, mind you. Got his first start of the season and the first start of his entire career after playing 18 minutes off the bench against Illinois and looking solid, 10-2-1. He in 19 minutes as a starter, 10 points, 4 rebounds, an assist, a block, and a steal. Luke Hunger, come on down. We are going to be talking about this play at 4K. Unfortunately, he put up 21 against Michigan State, so it's not as if he's going to be a super sneak. And if he starts, and it's an earlier game on the slate, so we'll know immediately, he will see some ownership there because a cheap starter, especially at forward, that just tends to garner rostership. He has the DVP spot, playing the 5 over Nicholson, who's not very good, and Martinelli's more of a 3-4 option off the bench. Luke Hunger at 4K against Penn State's putting up a 6X number tomorrow. You heard it here first. It's another lame thing to say in the industry, but I'm going to keep him coming tonight. But he is just a fantastic option. If he doesn't start, then I would back off that tremendously. I still think Martinelli at 4.8's at least a decent enough look. If he were to start, I would probably be on him. He's played 29, 22, and 21 minutes over the last 3, so they're clearly going to go to him a lot. Matthew Nicholson, who had a few games early in the season, has never been a consistent fantasy option. Not going to play a lot of minutes. Fouls ridiculously high. Not a guy we want to use. So Luke Hunger, that is the sneak, at least right now. But he's probably not going to end up that sneaky. Ty Berry, Brooks Barnheiser, Boo Buie, and Ryan Langborg, those 4 play a tremendous amount of minutes as they rotate through the 5. Langborg's just been okay, the Ivy Leaguer who did have a turn as the posh play of the day in the tournament last year. 5.6 is a solid enough price for him that makes him somewhat interesting. I do think he warrants consideration. The rest of these guys, Ty Berry at 6.7, he was real good against Michigan State and did have some exposure there, but 6.7 for Ty Berry is a very dangerous price point to pay. Has hit 30 plus in 3 of his last 4. You might finally feel like, wow, this guy's he's arrived. 5 years later, he's consistent. We can use him, but I'm still a little bit scared of kind of going up and paying 7K for Ty Berry. So a lot of that will depend on what the projected ownership or what we think it'll be on him. But I'll probably have some GBP shares. If he ends up being chalky, which I would be shocked about, then I will have 0, but I will certainly get exposure. Brooks Barnheiser, who at 7.1, to me, it was a non-con hero. Unplayable, borderline unplayable at 8K plus. At 7.1, he's much more of an appealing option. He does have a ability to rebound as well, can score, pretty efficiently. Somebody that is definitely capable of having a nice game here against this Penn State team in what would be considered a DVP spot for him as well. Does have a 27% combined rebounding rate for what it's worth. And then it finishes with Boo Buie 8-2. It's definitely an advantageous price for him because he plays basically every single minute. He put on a clinic, 19 points, 10 assists against Sparty for 45. Even though the price is cheap, I would still much rather play Soriano. I'd still much rather play Baycott. I know guard versus forward, but it just seems pretty tough for me to spend that price on Bowie when we can get some value guards or mid-range guys without having to sacrifice too much at forward. On the Penn State side, Kanye Clary, high usage guy, taking every shot that he could ever want for this Penn State team. Pretty automatic, just like 4x. Even when he starts off slow like he did against Michigan, he still ended with 31. So product of never leaving the floor and taking 20 shots. Only shot 5 of 20, but hey, 20 shots is 20 shots. Ace Baldwin at 7-2, had a huge game against Michigan. Don't like him quite as much against Northwestern. He has been a very high-end fantasy asset for us throughout the course of his career, playing for VCU, but he is somebody that will probably not make my player pool. He offensively can be challenged, and I don't like this spot for him against Northwestern necessarily. As far as anyone else, you have some value pieces. Puff Johnson there at 4.8, Nick Kern at 4.7. Kern is working himself. He got hurt a couple games back, but he's worked himself into a solid rotational piece, playing 20-plus minutes with consistency, sub 5K. I do think he is okay as a value piece if you want to use him. So there you have it on that. Tennessee versus Mississippi State. This is the lowest total on the slate at 138.5. Tennessee is a 1.5 point favorite. And let's talk about the Zakai Zeigler game that just transpired there against Ole Miss. 90-64, just a dog walk there of a game. Tennessee blew the doors off a team that has Alan Flanagan, Matthew Morrell, Jermaine Brakefield, Mo Cisse, Brandon Murray. Like, wow, look out for the Vols. We know they'll fail in March, but at least they can heat up and over the next couple of months and take money from me like they always do. But 37 minutes for Zakai Zeigler. If there was any question about his health, his conditioning, his rust, any of that, that's gone. There's no longer a question about that. 17 points. He hit 4 of 11 threes attempted, 5 rebounds, 10 assists, a block, and a steal. Zeigler with a masterclass game. I mean, wow. It's the second time he's hit 44 fantasy points in his last 4. He is finally back, healthy, good to go. It's a premium price of 7.7. We're not getting that 5.6 and the 4.5. Like, you only remember it was just late. What was it? Late November, early December. Priced at 4.9, and I was like, yeah, you got to play Zakai Zeigler at sub 5K. People were kind of, ribbing me like, oh, he got 20 and he didn't do all that well. It's like, he played 20 minutes. Yeah, I get it. But it's still Zakai Zeigler. Anytime he's under 5K, you just have to lock him. He's way too talented, and he's never going to be that cheap again unless he gets hurt again, God forbid. And now you're seeing him drop 44, 33, 26, 27, 44, like, Zakai Zeigler, everybody. So 7.7 there. Tough price, but shit, he's playing so well. I think you got to have some exposure somewhere. You do get his counterpart, Santiago Vescovi, for a cheaper price of 5.5. He's in consideration for tournaments. I don't trust him for a main slate or a main build by any means, but he has that upside when Zeigler's missing shots or struggling. We'll see. Was it the Kansas game? Vescovi just gets into a quote-unquote FU mode where he just can't miss or he'll take every shot available. He definitely has upside at 5.5, but is far from a safe look by any means. Jonas Idu, 7.4, high price, put up a big number against Ole Miss, but I'm typically not going to be paying that price for him, especially not against the Mississippi State front court, but he is definitely ascending. I think he'll end up being much better even than Oliver Mqua was for this team. Our man, Triple J, Josiah Jordan James, he is a nice look at 6.8. It's pretty much priced where he should be, kind of a 2022 Creighton look. So there's not a lot of upside there, but he's also not typically going to torpedo your lineup. You have Tobawaka. This might surprise some people sitting there at 5-5. He had a big game early, right after New Year's, which has prompted this price increase, but he's still not going to be necessarily playing a lot of minutes unless it's a super blowout. So the 5-5 price there, like I said, might surprise some people, but he's not exactly playable there at that price point. And then you have two really solid options. Dalton Connect, whose price has tumbled down to a low 5K range. And I have to question why. Why would we have a price drop like this? And DK, say what you will about them, but they're not stupid. He had a bad game at 7K, the blowout. And this tends to happen. Dalton Connect in blowouts isn't very good because he isn't needed. They kind of pull him back. It's like that shiny toy that they put away, and when they've got company or it's a situation where they need a bucket, they bring him out. And you see with his minutes in some of these games recently, it's been down for sure. But 5-3 for a player capable of putting up a monster game, he has to be used in pretty much all formats. We've basically swapped from Connect being 8K, Ziegler being 5K to Connect being in this range to now Ziegler being 8K. Minutes wise, hopefully that scares some people away. He's still a starter. There's no question about that. There is the slight possibility he's a non-con hero, meaning in the SEC games he starts to really fizzle out. But I will say the non-con of Tennessee was very tough. So being a non-con hero in their situation and their opponents is actually a good thing. Scoring 37 points against the Heels, putting up 13 and 6 against Kansas, which is a pretty solid number considering how good they are. He had some steals and other stuff. 16 and 7 against Purdue, 17, 4, 3, 2, 1 against Syracuse, 24 and 5 against Wisconsin. These are all solid opponents here. Didn't have a great game against NC State, even though that they won. So there is some potential worry there for Connect, but I'm a big believer in him. And just this is a one of those like super buy low spots where, yeah, the matchup's not great. His minutes have kind of been somewhat wonky, for lack of a better term, but this price is just way too cheap for Dalton Connect. He is far too good. Looking at his rates, 27% shot rate, still shooting 36% from long range, drawing about 5 fouls per 40. Yes, he doesn't have the peripheral stats of a guy like Triple J, but he can still easily pay off this price point, scoring 20 real points alone. So Dalton Connect, time to get back on the radar of the fantasy community here. But Rick Barnes seems somewhat content using him a little bit lighter than he was earlier on. And I don't know if that means he's saving him or what. We have seen additional minutes for Jemai Meshack off the bench. We have been seeing Jordan Gainey play some more off the bench as well. Pretty short rotation for the Vols overall, but Connect at 5-3 is just way too good to pass up. All right, Mississippi State side, I rarely am interested in rostering them these days. Tolu Smith is only 6'7", third game back after putting up a 28 and then a 20.5 against South Carolina. Both games off the bench, played roughly 20 minutes. Look for him to get into the starting lineup much sooner than I think a lot of us had expected. I thought he would honestly be out even longer, and he hasn't. So we're talking about a situation in which he will probably be starting. They'll need him here against the Vols, or I think you see his minutes spike up past 25. In the last game, they lost to South Carolina. Deshaun Davis and Cameron Matthews both played 30-plus minutes. DJ Jeffries and Shaquille Moore both played 25-plus minutes, and then Jimmy Bell played just 20 as he split that center minutes with Tolu Smith, which may still continue to be the case. If they end up starting Jimmy Bell again, just means that we're going to get less minutes for Smith. But if he jumps in the starting lineup like we saw with Dylan Dessou today, it's going to be a really hard fade, even against a really strong borderline elite defense of the Vols, because we know how good and what this kid means to this team. High usage guy, they're stud. They go as he goes, and they're going to focus on him a tremendous amount. So 6-7 is a very appealing price for him if we think we're going to get more than 19 to 20 minutes. All right, Kansas versus UCF. 7-point spread here in favor of the Jayhawks, 143.5 total. With the Jayhawks, this is a supremely fantasy-friendly matchup. Looking at the UCF side, they are a top 25 defense per KenPom, but they're playing at the 60th fastest tempo, while Kansas about 110. So there should be a lot of points scored here. I think that total feels a little bit low to me, especially considering UCF just gave up 77, nearly 80 points to Kansas State. In that game, they got their absolute just doors blown off. Tyler Perry went ballistic. Arthur Kaluma had a nice game. Cam Carter had a solid all-around outing. Will McNair, who's been playing well, played well again. But I think this is a spot where I think people will start to recognize whenever UCF's on the slate, you want to kind of mini stack against them, even if their on paper defense is somewhat good. But looking through UCF, their schedule, they had a brutal loss early to Miami, in which they gave up almost 90. They gave up 85 to Stetson, big powerhouse that is Stetson, over 70 to Ole Miss. And then they have a bunch of wins over Maine, Florida A&M, Bethune-Cookman, Charlotte, Cal State Fullerton, a terrible FIU team. This isn't the best non-con schedule in the world for Johnny Dawkins and company. The first minute they play a legitimate team in conference, which was Kansas State, they got completely just drubbed. And I think that's going to be the case here against Kansas. Looking at it, KenPom has it 75-68 in favor of Kansas. I don't see how this one isn't a double-digit loss. I'm definitely puzzled. The Kansas -7 to me, not a generational wealth moment, but that looking at all the various, spots that we've talked about betting here, we like the Providence +7.5 to a degree, but Kansas -7, I don't know. I don't know how that doesn't work out there. I know UCF is, I misspoke there. They are at home, but they're just, I don't know, very good. They're not very good under Johnny Dawkins this year. Jalen Sellers has been solid. Darius Johnson has been solid. They have a guy in Marcellus Avery who won't be afraid to bang with Huntington. However, he's only 6'7". And looking at it, they have Ibrahim Diallo, who's a 7-footer, elite shot blocker, but he does foul. The rest of the group that will be playing center and trying to guard Hunter Dickinson, Omar Payne, who's been on 18 different teams, Tierno Silla, who's almost 7 foot. Like, there's a lot of raw players in the front court that are just going to be guys who foul. Like, Dickinson's probably going to end up racking up a ton of free throws in this game, and I just foresee them winning by 10 plus points. Just my opinion, but that's how I see it. The Kansas guys, obviously Dickinson's expensive at 9.8. I typically don't like paying 10K. That's just not been my thing this year whenever we've done it. It hasn't quite worked out. If we find enough value to make it happen, I do see a pretty big double-double here, something like 12 to 14 rebounds, 20 to 25 points. So would be worth that 9.8 price point. Kevin McCullough, for his standards, had a mediocre game against TCU, and that's saying something because he almost scored 30. He's just been so good. His price has dipped slightly into the 8-9 range. He's going to be a tough guy for UCF to account for. Look for McCullough to put up another big game here and put up 40 plus as well. Don't love KJ Adams on the road, even though he has been really good over the last month of the season. 7-2. It's a little bit of a riskier price for him. The Kansas Jayhawks don't have much of a bench, so there is the opportunity for him to play through any early foul trouble, but still just not really looking to him. Rather go to McCullough or Dickinson, pay that money up for a Kansas guy and try to find value elsewhere. DeJuan Harris is somewhat interesting at 6'6". At least we know he's good for a safe 20 to 25 fantasy points. Won't break your lineup, won't hurt you necessarily either. And then you have the two youngsters, Elmarco Jackson and Johnny Furphy. Jackson there at 4'6", did play 24 minutes in their last game, has played 25 plus minutes in 4 of their last 5. Not quite cheap enough to put into your main lineup 4-6. He's not quite there with a 4x consistency, more of a 3x. If we got him at the Furphy price of 3.8 as a starter, I would like Jackson a lot more. Furphy sitting there, giving them the solid minutes off the bench, 10 to 15, which by Kansas and Bill Self standards, that's pretty good. At 3.8, he has a little bit of upside here if we think the minutes go higher. He has been chucking threes in his last few games. So Johnny Furphy is somebody to at least have any idea about as you're building out your MME pool. And Nick Timberlake is just not that great. UCF, we mentioned Jalen Sellers and Darius Johnson's. Both are under 7K, which at least gives them a little bit of upside here. I suspect they might project okay. It's based off the expected high tempo of this game. Sellers sitting there at 6'8", has taken a tremendous amount of shots. He has really kind of assumed the offensive alpha role from Darius Johnson, coming over from Ball State, where he wasn't even the alpha there. It was more of like the second or third option, but he has a career high in shot rate at 28%, usage rate at 25%, and he has a steal rate that's now eclipsed 3% as well, shooting about 26% from long range. Darius Johnson, we know him. He can fill up a stat sheet. Last year, his PRA overs at 17 to 19.5 were money. Just a straight walk to the ATM constantly. Haven't really talked or used him a lot this year. UCF hasn't been on the slate as much, but he is shooting 39%, has a usage rate above 24%. Marcellus Avery, who will be tasked, the New Mexico State transfer, tasked with dealing with that Kansas front court, 25.2% shot rate, shooting 42% from long range. Ibrahima Diallo, third best block rate in the country, a combined rebounding rate of 38%. Depends on if he can stay out of issues there. He's only 5'3", probably only going to be able to give you 15 to 20 max. He does have a relatively high fantasy point per minute number because of his great rates, but I just don't see any way that he is able to stack up against Dickinson here without ending up hacking. You have Shamari Allen, kind of a bit role player, playing 20 plus minutes at 5'4", just okay. Don't love a lot of UCF against Kansas. Antoine Jones, who's coming off the bench, played 14 minutes, 3.5. You want a throwaway GPP value. You could do worse than Antoine Jones. There is a possibility of him hitting the 20-minute mark. Has been around for a long time, hasn't really gotten to click since he started his career at Memphis. But he is somebody that I have a fondness for, and I do think still has a little bit left in the tank there if we can get him some minutes. All right, now we get to Louisville versus Miami. This is a top game on the slate by far. Anytime Louisville is on the slate, you know that. Total of nearly 160, currently sits at 158. Miami 16.5-point favorites. This would lead me to believe that Miami might try to not sit Norchad. I think he plays, but they may try to get away with playing him less than they normally would. And if they can get a halftime lead built without playing him 17 first half minutes, that'll make that a lot easier for them. Looking at the Miami side, Norchad with the ankle issue at 9.4. He's been a monster. I mean, put up nearly 50 against Wake. He has put up 45 plus in 3 of his last 4. I just have this feeling. I don't have a confirmation of this. I didn't read it somewhere. Just looking at the situation of how the game will play out and what to expect against a truly listless Louisville team, I think Miami will try to get away with playing Norchad less. He did play 41 minutes in the overtime game against Wake Forest, for what it's worth. Still looking at Wooga Poplar. He has missed the last couple, with him dealing with an ankle issue as well. We have seen Keshawn George ham send into a player that Miami really needed to step up when he did. 24, 30, 27, and 37 against Wake Forest. He played 42 minutes against Wake Forest. If Wooga Poplar's out again, Keshawn George will continue to start. His price has ballooned up from min price all the way to 6.5. But I got to tell you, if Poplar's out, Norchad's limited, Nigel Pack, dealing with an ankle issue as well. He could end up being out, I'm hearing. Like, the price on George might not be enough. With the situation we're looking at here, that Miami could be down several of their usual starters. George is playing like an 8K plus guy. His rates have been really strong in the last few games. Looking at it overall, usage rate above 20% in each of the last 2 games. He has now brought his 3-point percentage up to 43% overall in ACC play. He's shooting 53% from long range. He just looks very confident out there now that the kid is getting those minutes. So again, if he starts 6'5", I know it seems like a high sticker price, but consider the way he's playing and the fact that Miami's missing a quarter of their starting lineup and might be without 3 of them tomorrow, potentially. I don't think they will sit Omier, and I think Pack ends up playing, but we'll see. Seems like Poplar may have to go, and if he does, he's going to be very, very ineffective based off what I've seen with the reports of Poplar. Bensley Joseph, the GPP look there at 6'9". If we start to see ownership trending towards George, Joseph makes sense in large field, but definitely has a low floor. And then we have to look at guys like AJ Casey. He would be the direct Norchad replacement sitting there at 3'8", or Christian Watson, who without Poplar or without Pack would come in and play a role of 20, 25 minutes with ease, maybe even more. We saw him have a nice game in 26 minutes against North Florida. Hasn't been as good the last 2, even though he's played 20-plus minutes against Clemson and Wake. Lower upside guy compared to Keyshawn George. But again, 3-7, might be starting, might be playing big minutes. Miami might be without 3 of their starters. We'll have to see how that goes. It is with them breaking the slate up here, we have all of these games starting, within a half an hour of each other, basically in the first wave of games. So we'll have that information regarding Norchad, Poplar, and Pack relatively early in the day, or at least before lock enough to where we can make our moves, right? Louisville also dealing with a myriad of issues. Trey White has been dealing with a groin issue, which has kept him out for the last couple of weeks. You also have JJ Traynor, who is dealing with the shoulder issue, coming back. He's been out for roughly a month and a half. He was expected to come back, had a re-aggravation, had a minor new injury, and now it sounds like he's going to be out or is out for the rest of the season based off the reports. So tough scene there for JJ Traynor because it seemed like he was close, but alas, that's not going to work out for him. Dennis Evans, who was the, highly rated recruit that they were bringing in and expecting a lot from, can't get medically cleared, so they're going to be without him. Another of their big men, Emmanuel Okafor, who mainly just takes up space and grab rebounds. He's day-to-day with an ankle issue, hasn't played for just under a month. So they're dealing with a lot of issues themselves. Louisville's rotation is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. You might think that means we can use some of them, and honestly, we could. Miami hasn't been all that great this year. They don't look like the team that they did last year. I mean, they're certainly, when you look at their record, 11-3, losses against Kentucky, Colorado, and Wake Forest, those are solid losses. Wins against Clemson, who's starting to fall apart, Notre Dame, Kansas State, Georgia, UCF. But this Miami team, they don't have the look of last year's team. But Larinaga is a great coach, so you can't count him out. But with that being said, Miami is a team you can utilize guys against, and for DFS purposes, we don't have to be afraid to mini stack against them if we want to. And a Louisville mini stack is something that would be really, really low owned. So you can certainly look that way if you want. Looking at the last game, Louisville, they pushed Pittsburgh for a minute there, but they ended up losing by 13. Mike James, Sky Clark, Tyler Johnson, and BHH all played 30-plus minutes. They did start Danilo Jovanovic again, played only 11 minutes there. Curtis Williams and Caleb Glenn both played 20-plus off the bench. Aiden McCool, Hersey Miller, and Zan Payne played some spot minutes there. But this is looking like it's going to be a 7-man rotation. Mike James, guard forward eligibility. He's the most realistic play, but almost 7K for him. I'm not too sure. I'd probably rather go down to Brandon Huntley Hatfield, who let us down against Virginia, had a pretty awful game against Pittsburgh, but the minutes are there. He's going to continue to play 30-plus. I do think he snaps himself out of it. This is a matchup against Miami, especially if Norchad is banged up, limited, and or out, where he could definitely pay off this 6'6" price point. Sky Clark tasked with the alpha role at guard. No interest in him at 6'7". Just unfortunately don't think it's going to work out for him. Tyler Johnson is where I would want to go at 5K, expecting him to play a massive amount of minutes in this one. At this stage, Louisville would be wise, right? The season's done. Play the kid, let him go 35 plus minutes. Hopefully you get a new coach in there that's got some real star power. Louisville is a program that can easily and quickly turn it around. They have money. They have NIL. They have the facilities. They have the fan base. Like, get somebody good in there. Allow Tyler Johnson to just go completely ape and take over the program next year, be the alpha for whoever the new coach is, and hopefully he doesn't hit the portal. But I think Tyler Johnson at 5K is a very strong option, somebody that I'm going to have quite a bit of. And then the two bench guys, Curtis Williams, 4-2, Caleb Glenn, 3-4, both off the bench. Glenn playing 20-plus minutes off the bench at 3-4 would be a GPP look. Curtis Williams gives you guard forward eligibility. He's actually played 20-plus minutes in 4 straight, and he has paid off this price in 3 of those 4. So don't sleep on Curtis Williams. He is definitely a guy that could be a nice little 2% owned play that pays off there and allows you some additional savings up top to stuff some of these studs that we want. He has a 25, he's a freshman also, 25% shot rate, making 36% of his threes. So when he's out there, he's making things happen. Injuries have definitely opened the door for him to see some additional time and absorb those minutes. All right, Clemson versus Virginia Tech. Clemson is 1.5 point favorites, a total of 145. What's going on, man? What is happening to PJ Hall? Because he is just like the most playable of the year at 8'6". But damn, fouls have really wrecked him the last couple of games. But the Miami game, really no business getting into foul trouble there. I think he just got a little, he got a bad whistle, number one. And once he got frustrated, he just couldn't get his head in the game. But against North Carolina, he just struggled. The Baycott-led front court put Hall in the meat grinder, as they say, and he just never really got going. 3 straight games under 30 fantasy points, but you see DK's being very careful with his price. They're not dropping him to 7K, thank God. 8'6" is enough to keep people away, and I don't love the spot for him. Going up against a physical Virginia Tech front court on the road, I don't know that PJ Hall is necessarily the play, and I'm the biggest PJ Hall fan in this industry, not only a member, or not only the president, but a member as well of the fan club. They've been pushing PJ Hall agenda for 3 years now. But I don't know that he's all that great of a play here. And it pains me to say that, but I think I would be probably underweight compared to where other people would be with PJ Hall. Like, I just don't know how you would play him over Baycott, honestly, in their prospective matchups and price points. So Ian Schiffelin taking the Hunter Tyson role. He has been phenomenal. 52 against North Carolina. Can you believe it? Ian Schiffelin, from what you know with him last year being a role player, well behind RJ Godfrey, Hunter Tyson, PJ Hall. I mean, it is a wild ascension. And this spot, what I'm referring to as Hunter Tyson spot on Clemson, is a very beneficial role to have because you don't get the same defensive attention that PJ Hall gets. You get to basically run unimpeded on the block. You get easy buckets. If you're a great rebounder like Schiffelin is and Hunter Tyson was, you get a lot of weak side stuff, and you're blocking shots at an alarming rate. And Schiffelin had 5 steals, 4 blocks in that game against North Carolina. That's a big reason why he obliterated. But he also had 16 and 11. And it's his second time in a row having a double-double, and it's his 4th time in 5 games pulling down 11-plus rebounds. So Ian Schiffelin, his price continues to raise, but at 7-8, I feel pretty confident that that's going to continue. But that is a really tough price. He's a GPP look. That's a play I suspect most of you, myself included, have not been using religiously, and I don't know that you can suddenly just jump on him at 8K against Virginia Tech. If they were at home or they were playing a team like Louisville, Notre Dame, Syracuse matchup for Ian Schiffelin. that's going to be nasty. Then I would be more than willing to pay $8K. I'd probably be more than willing to pay $9K with the way he's playing. You have Joey Girard, high usage scoring guard. You know the deal on him. Chase Hunter, who has got his swagger back, got his groove back, if you will, kind of mired in a slump there from late November into December, caused his price to get below almost 5K, and now he's playing well again, back up to 6.4. Don't love his price, but Chase Hunter is a crucial part of Clemson's success. They need him to play well, play big minutes, and be confident, as Clemson needs to stop this kind of slide they're on. They're 11-3, lost 3 of their last 5 against Memphis, Miami, and North Carolina. They got to win this game. Absolutely have to win it. Ken Palm has a 73-72, by the way. But this is a very tough one for them, for sure. They're going to have to gut it out. The values that you have on the team, as Jack Clark and Alex Hemingway continue to miss games. Chauncey Wiggins, who's there at 5.2. Low end value, and then RJ Godfrey at 4.6, who's playing a consistent 15 to 18 minute role. Not a lot there, pretty lean value, but those are the primary bench pieces for the Clemson Tigers and guys who will absorb minutes if Hall continues to get into foul trouble. For Virginia Tech, Lynn Kidd has been an absolute revelation. I don't know. Lynn Kidd, he's the last couple of slates with Virginia Tech, he's projected super well. I didn't love him against Florida State. Didn't use him there. Got away with it. Had a few shares against Wake Forest. He's just a really good play, but I fear that he might wind up being the de facto classic, non-con hero, because when you look at Virginia Tech's non-con schedule, it hasn't been great. They did lose by a lot to Auburn. They did beat Iowa State on a neutral, which that win's going to hold up. They beat Boise State on a neutral, lost to South Carolina on a neutral, and then they have a bunch of wins against like Valparaiso, Coppin State, Wofford, Campbell, Vermont, American, like teams that they should be beating up on, and Lynn Kidd did have good games against them. So I don't foresee me being able to pay 7.6 for him against Clemson, but we did just see Baycott absolutely own them. Kidd could do the same, but that is a very stingy price that I just don't feel comfortable with. Sean Padula at 5.7 is a real nice look. We haven't seen him play that well, but he did explode against FSU, 26 points, hit 3 threes, 17 shot attempts. His price drops 100 to 5.7 after the 31. Have to get exposure to Sean Padula. He is somebody who, banged up for a time, playing through some ailments, but still has really, really strong rates. Missed a couple of games there in December, but it appears he's ready to go. He does lead the team in usage and shot rate, both above 30%. His assist rate is above 30%. He's making 35% of his threes, and he's drawing almost 6 fouls per 40, the second best mark in the ACC. Right now in conference play, he has the highest usage rate in their conference. Sean Padula is playing really well and has to be considered a core play. Even though he's been bad up to that point, I think he's finally kind of shaking that rust off and he's good to go. So Sean Padula, 5.7, certainly looking like a lock for us. You have Hunter Couture at 6.3, Tyler Nickel at 5.2, just a bunch of secondary options on this team. It's really just play Padula, and do you want GPP shares of Lynn Kidd? Kind of where my head is at. We do have a 4.4 MJ Collins playing 20-plus minutes, low fantasy point per minute player. Robbie Barron, who has started several games, at 4.3, low fantasy point per minute player. All right, getting to the last set of games here, last trio of games. Actually, we already covered North Carolina. So 2, UConn versus Xavier. UConn 4-point favorites, total of 146.5. A tough spot for Xavier, to be certain. This is the part where I talk about, Quincy Olivari, Davion McKnight, Desmond Cloud. Those are the 3 you're generally looking at. I typically like to take the cheapest of the 3, which is at this moment Desmond Cloud. Solid rates, taking a ton of shots. He would be my guy to use against UConn, but I typically not trying to play too many guys against UConn for what it's worth. And then you have Obu Osmine, who could have a nice game with a, gaping hole in the UConn front court with no Donovan Clingan. Samson Johnson's done his thing, but if he can't stay out of foul trouble, Ousmane could have a nice game, but he's also looking at potential foul trouble himself. On the UConn side, Stephen Castle, priced up to 6'9". He is officially arrived in his freshman season and probably a one and done. Castle, missed a little bit of time, was cheap, very, very cheap, and he simply exploded. The game against DePaul was his real true coming out party. Follows that up after 14, 4, and 7. That's 32 fantasy points. Goes up against Butler, leads them to a 7-point win, 14, 9, and 4, 2 steals, 34 fantasy points. His explosion has correlated with Tristan Newton's kind of down games recently. Newton did have 30 against Butler, but at $8K, you could have got that for cheaper with Castle. He wasn't great against DePaul. The game ended up blowing out. Had 5 rebounds, 7 assists, but once that blowout was on, he just doesn't need it. Newton's price of 7.8 is very appealing, no doubt about it. I still have to go to Castle at 6'9" and take that slight discount because of the way he's playing. You have a 7'3" Cam Spencer, who has the last couple of slates been pretty low owned. He's just about an automatic 30-32. Like him a lot. This is a bit of a UConn mini stack that we can roll. Alex Caravan at 7'5", same thing, 30-plus fantasy points. Sign me up. I like all of those guys. Then you have Samson Johnson at 5'1", who has, had solid production as the starting 5, 3 straight games over 17 fantasy points. So you can definitely look to him at that 5'1" price point as well. Foul's definitely an issue. We got the nut game against DePaul for Hassan Diarra. In just 19 minutes, he put up 14, 5, and 5. Priced at 5K here after a down game against Butler. We'll get him back into the 4K range. We can start talking about using Hassan Diarra again, but we don't really need him at that 5K price point. All right, next game and last game on the slate, Wisconsin versus Ohio State. Ohio State 1-point favorite, 140 total. Now, Ohio State comes into the season with some defensive stoppers. Their strong perimeter D throughout the first month or two of the season has leaked and cracked a little bit. They gave up a huge number to Ray Battle, who scored 24 real points, pulled down 10 rebounds. They did win that game, but Ray Battle was huge. Then they get the win over Rutgers, 76-72. But Derek Simpson, 23 points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals. Absolutely detonated. They even gave up 17 and 5 to Noah Fernandez for good measure. Suddenly, this perimeter defense of Ohio State's not looking so great. Then you go to the Indiana game, which caused this Xavier Johnson madness that we experienced today. In 34 minutes, XJ, 18 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, a block, and a steal. They even gave up 10 points to CJ Gunn off the bench, and Malik Renew, of course, had a big game there, but he's more of a 4. But suddenly this Ohio State defense is extremely fantasy friendly. And I think we're going to end up being able to target against them a lot this year. The problem is it's Wisconsin, and I don't necessarily love using Wisconsin guys. My primary option usually is AJ Storr, but he's priced at 5'6", and we know he's going to be hugely reliant on his scoring abilities. Not going to give us a lot in the peripheral categories. The big blowout win over Nebraska, he was only needed for 20 minutes. He did score 22 fantasy points, and it was a game in which he scored just 10 real, put up 5 rebounds, 3 assists, and a steal. So he had some peripherals there, but that's not usually something we can count on with Storr. That's a little bit scary. Going up against Iowa, he had him cord 21 fantasy points, 16 real, but again, no peripherals to speak of. The 5'6" price point is definitely advantageous, but I just don't know if we can core him or use him in our main build because I just worry if he has a bad shooting night, he's not going to pay off that seemingly good price of 5'6". Tyler Wall back up to 6'8" after a couple of big games, back-to-back 35-plus explosions. Need to see his price come back down before we really consider using him as well. Steven Crowell is the most expensive player on Wisconsin, which is a crazy thing to think about. He's been as high as 7.5 at points this year. Playing 30 minutes, it's a neutral matchup for the front court, just kind of, not on the idea of paying 7K for him. You do have Chucky Hepburn as a primary guard at 5'5", who does contribute in peripherals more than AJ Storr and showed a little bit of scoring prowess in their game against Nebraska. He's an excellent option at 5'5", somebody that you can fill out your lineup with. Don't start with him, but if you end up landing there as the last guy in, I'm fine with Chucky Hepburn. Usually I'm not, because he's priced at 6-7K, but at 5'5", I can definitely get down with that and feel pretty decent about that one. John Blackwell at 5'1", still probably a year away before really being able to use him consistently. And then you have Max Klessman at 4'8", playing nearly 30 minutes a game. Low end option at best. Ohio State, Roddy Gale is usually my guy. He's priced at 6'6". He's kind of struggled the last couple of games after putting a huge number up on West Virginia. I do like him for a semi-bounce back, but the thing about Gale is he's taken a ton of shots, 17, 15, and 21 shot attempts over his last 3 games against the likes of Indiana, Rutgers, and West Virginia. Is a guy who can rebound, adds assists, adds stocks. He does a little bit of everything. So when Gale's shots at that volume are hitting, he's putting up those big numbers. Leads the team in usage at 25.3%, shooting 36% from long range, has a 21% assist rate. Then you have Bruce Thornton, the lead guard there, running the show. Offensively, he's been challenged throughout his short career, but he's taken a ton of shots as well. 17 against Indiana, 15 against Rutgers, and 12 against West Virginia. Had a couple of 30 spots and a 41 against Rutgers. Came back down to earth against Indiana, but again, 4 for 17 from the field. Heavy volume there. If Thornton doesn't get himself into foul trouble, because he does body a lot and he does reach watching their games, he does have a shot to play well here. And this would be the game to hit like a double overtime just to troll people, because I don't think a lot of ownership is going to come the way of this particular game. Jamison Battle at 6'5" is just a mediocre play. I know his logs are attractive at that price, hitting 27 plus in 4 straight. But I do think Wisconsin takes him out of it for the most part. And if you really wanted an Ohio State guy, Zed Key at 5K, even though he's not playing a huge amount of minutes, his fantasy point per minute number is high. He's got solid rates. He can rebound at a high clip. He's somebody that can put up a 4 or 5x number in as little as 17 to 20 minutes at this price point, regardless of matchup. And then you have Felix Opara, who is playing majority of the minutes at the 5 there, 30 plus lately. Put up a 36 against Indiana in their tough front court. I think Okpara is going to continue to be leaned upon heavily. Looking at his rebounding rates, they're not quite to the level on the offensive side as Zed Key, but still really strong, 38% combined rate. He does have a block rate of nearly 12%. For comparison, Zed Key has a combined 33% rebounding rate, 3.5% block rate. Both of those guys just have some really upper tier efficiency rates, and they just need more minutes. Both Okpara playing 30, 27, and 28 minutes over his last 3. He has been able to put up some pretty solid numbers overall. 6'1", just an okay price though. All right, the slate is done. Talking about the core here. There's a lot of pieces to like here. Need to internalize some of this before putting it to paper, updating the sheet in the morning. But right now, with the injuries that Miami is having and who I'm thinking are going to be out, I'm putting Keshawn George as a core. That's subject to change depending on how that news shakes out. But I think the good times continue with him. And even though he's 6'5", a date with Louisville on a short-handed roster for both teams is just such a great spot for Keshawn George to continue to kind of dig out this role and clearly be the guy next year at this rate. Second member of the core, as long as he starts at 4K, is going to be Luke Hunger going up against Penn State. If you know me, you know I'm a sucker for DVP. If I get a cheap guy that's going to be starting against the Penn State front court, I got to play him. If he doesn't start, I'll back off a little bit, but why not continue to start him? He's looked good the last couple of games. Let's keep it rolling. And then the third core member, there's so many up top you could use. We talked about Dickinson, McCullough. I'll core a player above 8K here to kind of give you a mix. But Armando Bacot, I'm sorry to do it to you, Alex, but Armando Bacot at 8'4", It's a road matchup, but between him and Soriano, I think I'm 50-50 on those guys and want heavy exposure to them, and we'll try to fit both. But I think both Bacot and Soriano are in store for 45 to 50 fantasy point games. More so Bacot, but Soriano should be able to do it as well as long as the team continues to feed him. That makes it impossible to probably fit Devin Carter, but that won't stop me from trying. Soriano, Bacot, Devin Carter are my favorite pay-ups. I am going to core Armando Bacot of that group with Kashawn George, who I'm very confident in, and Luke Hunger for Northwestern. All right, PrizePicks. Let's see what we're working with here. I looked at the board beforehand. They did get us. I emailed one of the reps and asked them to start putting fantasy score totals the night before. They did, but they only gave me 2, so not really much difference there. Tolu Smith against Tennessee. I know it's a perceived tougher matchup, but 20.5 points, rebounds, assists. I think we could see him get into the starting lineup for this one. If he does, projected 30 minutes, certainly think even against Tennessee, he should be able to put up 21 plus combined. So we'll take that one as our first play. Sean Padula over 19.5 points, rebounds, assists versus Clemson. After seeing him play last game, I think he's definitely awoken, shaking off the rust of the injury woes, and is going to start playing really, really well here in conference play. And then Oklahoma's playing TCU. It's a matchup that Oklahoma should win. I like Javion McCollum. He's been really good to me from a PRA standpoint, between 19.5 to 21.5. And I've continued to hit that over, and he just does me well. So I like the spot for him against TCU, over 21.5 points, rebounds, and assists for Javion McCollum of Oklahoma. Now, don't forget, there is the 7-game night slate. We're not going to go over that here, but I will touch on it in the Discord and put up a player pool. And depending on the time, and if I have any, which is usually no, I will have a sheet put together with the night slate projections as well, or at least try my best to do that for you guys. All right, let me just check DK, see if there's any goodies that we want to look at here. All right. So the Soriano point prop, remember I was saying if it's 14.5, it's a generational wealth situation. I knew it wouldn't be. DK has got it at 17.5, and they're offering it at plus 105. So Soriano's putting up 20 points, 20 real points. So maybe that number will get up to 18.5. And if it does, that's probably getting a little bit lean, but we get plus money on a guy that should score 20. I'm taking the over, and that's one of my favorite props. That will be one that I have a heavy amount of when I get to the DK book tomorrow at some point. Let's see. I wanted to give one more point prop that I saw. Oh, Zakai Zeigler. It's plus 100 at 12.5. He's here to stay. He's healthy. He's good to go. Looking at Zakai Zeigler, I think we're going to see him score, 15 to 20 points regularly the rest of the way. So getting that at plus 100 at 12.5 and being able to put that with the 17.5 of Soriano automatically gets us to plus 310 on a two-legger. I feel really good about that. Those are my two favorite props. I'll be slamming the hell out of those. And I will have those in the tracker up on ftnbets.com. If you haven't checked that out just yet, make sure you do so. The betting side of our company, a lot of sharp minds. Kutry killing the props. Mike Randall crushing the totals and the sides. We have a very good collegiate team here with lots of content for you to absorb. All right, that'll do it for us tonight. That ends the Super Show. We will be back on Friday night, 9 p.m. PST, midnight for those of you on the East Coast. That will cover the big Saturday slate of games. There'll be some strategy talk that night too, because what I've noticed the last couple of weeks and even years past, and we know this, everybody covers the main slate on a weekend, but very few cover the afternoon and night slate, and those are generally pretty soft, meaning people are putting in suboptimal lineups. They're not paying attention to news, or there's overlay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that and some opportunities and maybe some a core play for those slates, something like a semi-player pool for you guys to build around and have some sort of content for those slates. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate that continued support. See you on Friday. Let's go out there and win lots of money tomorrow. Green screens and window trips galore. See ya.